if home ownership is American dream, we should have record high home sales. But we don't have record high home sales. By forcing to build 6 homes in an acre, automatically you are building smaller size home and more affordable homes. The jobs are going to people who are in the country, not people who are crossing the border to get a job.
That real estate is one of those things that in an abundant world is still finite.
If you self-select out of owning real property, in the long run, my guess is that you probably look back and end up regretting that.
Episode 77 of Market Moves with Mark and Jeff, the award-winning Market Moves with Mark and Jeff. 2 uninteresting guys talking about interesting times, and occasionally we bring on very interesting guests. Today with us, we have the Nostradamus of neighborhoods. Yes, ChatGPT gave me that suggestion, Dr. Yoon. With us is NAR, National Association of Realtors Chief Economist, Dr. Lawrence Yoon. Dr. Yoon, you have been doing this at NAR for as long as I've been in appraisal. This is nearly 25 years here. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mark, for inviting me. Hello, Jeff. And certainly, congratulations on your award on the podcast. You know, our staff at NAR who does appraisal mentioned that you are doing a terrific job in getting the award. So congratulations.
Very kind of you. We definitely appreciate that. This has definitely started out as a passion project, but Mark and I just have, we live and breathe real estate and care what's happening and try to understand, all of the swirling currents that take place out there. And so we thought, well, why not record it and try to share it with people that, might get some value out of it. And honestly, I never would have guessed that it would lead us to, having a conversation with you in person. I've seen you, and as Mark had kind of set up, a lot of your forecast projections, kind of interpretation of what's happening from an economic perspective into real estate markets, for a very long time. So been kind of a fan of the work that you've done for a long time, and really excited to have you here with us today.
Yeah, I have to join. Appraisals are part of the whole real estate ecosystem. I know some of the appraisals are realtors, and they want to join because they want that networking opportunity to others, and then obviously have that expanded business opportunity. So glad to join you.
NAR's efforts, even extra visible here in the last few years, reaching out to appraisers, and even education. We've been trying to do this a little bit because even last couple of years, I've learned quite a bit more about the data that you put out, how useful it is for appraisers in what we do, and I think this connection really helps, and we all need to work together. Sometimes it's sort of odd when you look back that appraisers and realtors don't work as closely together. I almost think they can't, and I think it's a natural disposition. So I think conversations like this are really good to further that effort.
Yeah, great.
Well, Dr. Yoon, let's dive in. We've got you for a short 45 minutes. I think we could talk for 45 hours. So maybe one day we can have you back on. Things change daily here. I have noted that in your predictions in NAR's market forecast that you have declared 2026 as the year of recovery. Boy, that's something we like to hear. Tell me a little bit about that.
The home sales activity in the past 3 years has been a subpar performance. Now, if we go back to pre-COVID condition, 2019, home sales were running around 5.2 million, nationwide. And that was a good reference point because few years before COVID were also running at that pace. But in the past 3 years, 4 million. That is a 75% of normal activity conditions. So certainly it has impacted realtors, mortgage originators, appraisers, and people in the industry. Even the moving truck business have been impacted condition. But one of the most interesting part about the current housing cycle is that homeowners are all smiling. They are super happy to be homeowners. They are super happy they bought a home, and they are continuing to see the growth in their housing wealth. So we have an interesting situation where the clients of the realtors are super happy, but the realtors are in a sense challenged on the business conditions.
Boy, we have seen that, and I don't know. This has sort of like become folklore. This stat, it's a single sentence, and I have seen it circulated on social media for a year probably now. But something like 70% of licensed real estate agents actually or did not sell a home in 2025. Do you have anything around that? Is that overstated? What do you think?
Using maybe the White House terminology, but we take survey of our realtor members, and then clearly, this is an entrepreneurial business. There's no guarantee of success. One can say that typical entrepreneurial rule of 80-20 rule apply. 20% of the agents, realtors doing 80% of the business. Clearly, we see that. So in our data, we are finding maybe 10% of the realtors have zero transactions, but then we have about 30% who do minimal transactions where their gross commission income is less than $25,000. I mean, that's not enough to survive in the current economy. But then we have 20% of the realtors who have six-figure gross commission income. So it clearly shows the entrepreneurial aspect of the business where not everyone succeeds, but some people have great marketing, great strategy of attacking it. Other people, even those people who are challenged, I salute to them because they are testing out their entrepreneurial spirit. I think part of the America, the land of opportunity is you are your own boss. You want to give it a try. Some people succeed, other people don't. But that figure that's been floating around, which I have seen, actually, I have seen it. I don't know where it came from. They reference NAR is nothing of our statistics, but it is an entrepreneurial business 80-20 rule.
That makes a lot of sense. And I think even on the appraisal side, we see a similar thing where some, kind of do it, not full time or not in a high volume or in like a formal firm, kind of an arrangement. Others do, there's not a right or wrong, but I think you're speaking to just the entrepreneurial spirit. I think in real estate generally, whether you're sales, whether you're mortgage, whether you're appraisal, there's definitely an aspect of, the 80-20 rule in a lot of ways. I think that, that tends to play out. And all of us, looking at the data are hoping that you're right. I mean, we're cheering for you to be right about 2026 being a year of recovery. It's hard to think that things will stay as compressed as far as just total transaction volume as they have been for the last 3 years, as if you cited, pre-COVID, we're 75% off of that. Even a return to the historic norm would certainly be, a welcome change at this point. Dr. Yoon, what are some of the things that you think drive or lead us to a recovery and a marked improvement or increase in transactions that take place in 2026?
So, one looks at the sort of the backdrop of the economy. The labor market has been somewhat sluggish of late. There was a little revision in the payroll data, which showed that in 2025, essentially no job addition. January added 100,000 jobs. But if you look at the long-term picture, what you are finding is that currently there are 6 million more people working and receiving paycheck. And I'm talking about paycheck, not commission income, W-2 statement paycheck. 6 million more people receiving paycheck today compared to pre-COVID. So based on that, if home ownership is American dream, we should have record high home sales. But we don't have record high home sales because the condition has not been favorable to buying a home. Very high mortgage rate from 2022, late 2022, when Federal Reserve aggressively raised interest rate, mortgage rates suddenly going from 3% to 8%, that completely knocked off the home buying momentum. But the reason for my recovery year outlook for this year is first, mortgage rate. Right now we are in February, and we are seeing that mortgage rates are close to 6%. 1 year ago, it was 7%. So 7% to 6%, one may say that's not a big deal, but if one sort of visualize America's income distribution shape, bell-shaped curve, what we're finding is that based on median home price, typical income to buy a home in America last year was around $103,000 household income. This year, at lower mortgage rate, it is $94,000. I mean, that's still above but at least how many people are between those income gap? And we are finding there's quite sizable number who could respond. And my staff did some statistical analysis to say, just because people suddenly qualify does not mean they buy a home. In fact, it's only 10% of the people who recently qualify who actually enter the market. But even that figure leads to about 14% growth in home sales, unit sales this year. Now, of course, those are what the statistical modeling is suggesting. I could be off. It could be, even better than that figure or much lower than that figure. But let's remember, housing is a cyclical business. It goes up, it goes down. Everyone in the audience knows that. But once it begins to recover after a downturn, to see a double-digit percentage unit sale growth, that is quite normal. So it's not an abnormal exaggeration to see a double-digit percentage growth during a recovery phase.
Yeah, I really appreciate that perspective. And for as long as I can remember in this space, the seasoned veterans would always tell you it feels like it's feast or famine. You're either in a contracting, like desperate for work, or so much that it's hard to even keep up. And I think that's in part what you're describing. One of the things that you mentioned was interest rate environment today versus 12 months ago. And we've been interested, we've been following kind of this saga of who's going to lead the Federal Reserve, going forward. Well, that person with Kevin Warsh has been identified. And so at least that question is answered. Do you have any perspective on what you anticipate the impact to rates going forward might be as a result of his appointment to the Fed chair?
Well, Kevin Walsh, I would say, is a solid pick. I think all the economists would respect his decision. And I'm sure during the interviewing process with President Trump, he probably indicated that we need to have lower interest rate in this current economic cycles. I'm sure that was one of the reason for the pick, but also the timing of the pick. I think that President Trump made that pick, even though the appointment or Senate confirmation process does not occur, until like May time period, just to sort of hint that Jay Powell, he is a lame duck. Maybe this is a signal that President Trump wants to say, don't pay attention to Jay Powell. People need to pay attention to Kevin Walsh. So the Wall Street trying to digest what the Kevin Walsh monetary policy move would be. But he did indicate in the past also that, sometimes Federal Reserve is sort of encroaching on activity which should not be part of the Federal Reserve, like purchasing the various bond measures, quantitative easing process, and also he's always focused on the inflationary numbers. But there's a lot of back and forth about the reasoning for the rate cut versus the reasoning not for a rate cut, things like this. But Kevin Walsh, from the economist professional perspective, very solid pick. I think people will respect his decisions.
So we did a prediction show, as any self-respecting podcast would do here for 2026. And, my first, Jeff correctly guessed Warsh as the pick. I was with Hassett, but wanting Warsh. I thought Warsh was the superior pick because of the stance of kind of getting the Fed out of the way. Maybe we don't hang on every word that the Fed chairman says. That seems like a healthier place to be once we get there. It seems to be setting up. And I'm curious to your perspective on this. I feel like it is setting up for maybe a large cut and then set up certainty of a roadmap forward, like not making a lot of moves. What is your thought?
I think that actually may be a best policy, and I'm sure Kevin Walsh is thinking through that process because he wants to provide a little certainty and also get away from any policy which should be more of a legislative, things like environmental rules. Should the Federal Reserve provide credit to people who are turning green on certain manufacturing process? Kevin Warsh said, no, that's not the job of the Federal Reserve. Federal job of Reserve is maximum employment, contain inflation, make sure the dollar is a dollar, it does not depreciate in a major way. So, very solid pick in that regard. But I think, Mark, you are absolutely right. I think, people want certainty. So do a sort of big rate cut at the beginning and say, I'm going to just let it go. And then market can begin to adjust it to say this is the new normal. And then as there's provide more certainty to it, naturally people will make business plan based on that.
Boy. Being able to plan and some certainty, boy, wouldn't that be a welcome change? And not just from the Fed. I'm not sure the president's helping too much either in that regard. So you mentioned inventory a bit. It certainly is climbing, from an overall perspective. where do we need to be from a national standpoint to be a healthy inventory level?
We had the latest January sales figure come out, which was disappointing. We had a good December figure, but then January figure began, just simply slump down again to say that the recovery path is still not there yet. Maybe it's the wintry, exceptionally cold weather in the Midwest, New England state that held back some degree. But overall inventory in the latest month is up only 3% from 1 year ago. That figure needs to be up 30%, 40%. Now, I do have a conjecture as to why the inventory levels still remain tight, is that homeowners are feeling very comfortable, housing wealth situation. So I think some homeowners are saying that, winter month is not a good time to sell the property. You have to do some price discount, those conditions. So they are saying, well, if I'm not desperate, why don't I wait until the spring buying season? The spring buying season has that terminology. A lot of people begin to show up. So I think it was more delisting to relist in the spring buying season. But as we begin to see inventory, I want to say like 30%, 40% higher inventory, give more options for the buyers. Let the buyers get excited. Do I choose house A or house B? And then sort of digest this over the weekend before deciding. But right now, lack of inventory is clearly hindering some market. We are hearing in the New England region specifically, where home building activity has been very lagging, and therefore, any inventory comes up, there's still some residual multiple offer in New Jersey, say in Massachusetts, but in the Florida and Texas, where they have greatly ramped up housing construction over the recent years, plenty for inventory, and prices are actually falling somewhat from this oversupply, I say temporary oversupply situation.
That makes a lot of sense. And, we've definitely, it's been very much talked about, this lock-in effect of those that are locked into a low mortgage rate, may not be willing to move or sell. I think you're kind of touching on both, new construction inventory, as well as just unlocking existing inventory of people, willing to sell the homes that they're in. What's your perspective on the current affordability of housing in the moment? It's something we hear a lot talked about, and I think factors into the overall transaction volume that we're seeing. But what's your perspective on that? Where do you think things maybe go in terms of affordability?
So the affordability, it may become an election issue in 2026. Every members of House of Representatives is running 1/3 in the Senate. But to gauge it, New York City's mayor's race, where Mandani won quite by easily, where he ran on affordability issue. But if you look at the data, what we are finding is people's income is now rising faster than consumer price inflation. So overall, people's affordability to buy stuff at grocery store, at the gas station is improving somewhat. Related to the housing market, home price growth has been minimal, 1%, 2% nationwide. Income growth is 4%. So at least income is beginning to outpace home price growth. But the big driver of affordability is really on mortgage rates. So with the mortgage rate going down from 7% last year to 6% this year, that is a great driver. And in the latest month, we are finding that affordability, housing affordability, as we have been tracking over time, is the best in nearly 4 years. So people who have been frustrated over the recent years, give it a try again. Look for, people have better chance to qualify for a mortgage. Maybe there's more homes on the market. Certainly in Texas and Florida, much more choices in some of the southern states. So affordability on housing is improving, but it is not the super low interest rate of 3%, 4% in the years immediately during the COVID, massive stimulus. But also people need to understand 3% mortgage rate, 4% mortgage rate, those were bonus mortgage rate that will not repeat. I don't think it will repeat for the remainder of my lifetime. So when people see 6%, I think they should consider is a good rate. 5%, I don't think we will get there, but if we do, I will be cheering it on. Anything below 5, not happening.
Well, there's a certain level where just economically and long-term, it makes sense to lend money for 30-year mortgage and where it doesn't. And except for the exceptional circumstances in the COVID era and, the reasons to try to stimulate, I mean, that you're right. It's just not historically been, a reality that I could go borrow 30-year money at 2 or 3% interest rate. There were kind of extraordinary factors that led up to that. But you do make a good point that those that have been frustrated with affordability might find more options than they realized when they looked 1 or 2 years ago. I've got a brother who's a realtor and represents buyers and sellers, and with builders and new construction inventory, they're motivated to try to help get people into their homes, and so they're offering rate buy downs or other things that beyond just what you see as the published 30-year fixed rate mortgage. They're doing things to help the affordability aspect of it as well. One of the groups that he works with pretty regularly are kind of younger, either first-time home buyers or kind of Gen Z, buyers. And I'm curious, are you seeing any meaningful shift in the demographics as far as the outlook on home purchasing, whether a desire to try to get in because they've been forestalled or holding back and waiting longer? The median age of the first-time home buyer has gone up a lot, but curious about your perspective on kind of how the demographics factor into this equation.
The demographic, they said demography is destiny. At a certain age, people do certain things. By the late 20s, people get married. But in their 30s, maybe they have their first child and so forth. So historically, the age of a first-time buyer tends to be around 30, maybe 31, 33. Last year, shocking statistics, disappointing statistics, typical age of a first-time buyer, 40. Now, we did get some pushback among some people who ran different data to say, no, that's not actually the case, but they're basing on mortgage data. So according to technicality on the mortgage, if someone was a homeowner and then did not own a home and they re-enter the market 5 years later, they count that as a first-time buyer, even though a person is not truly first-time buyer in the mortgage data. But the way we do conduct our surveys, we simply ask the home buyer, are you a first-time buyer? And then based on that, we get that age of 40, and we clearly see that home ownership rate has been falling for people under the age of 40. So there is a little frustration, but I think the frustration is really on the financial capacity and not about giving up hope on the American dream. I think people understand if you want to build America, if you want to say you made it in America, you have to own a property in America. So I think the home ownership dream is there. Just the financial capacity has been difficult, lack of inventory. But in 2026, the condition will improve, not the super improvement, but more inventory, that's better. Lower mortgage rate, that's better. Income growth, that's better. So I think housing ability to get into the market is definitely better in 2026.
Fascinating. And the first-time homebuyer age in the fall is really shocking on some level. Unsurprising, maybe. I guess I'm surprised the data reflects some of the anecdotal trending that I would see out there. But Jeff and I on the podcast have been comparing that reality, the increasing age of the first-time home buyer with the decreasing age of the first investment, specifically in stock markets that we see. And I wonder if it's diagnosing a different perspective, at least for a period of time. Maybe it won't be long lasting, but a response to the lack of affordability, the success of the stock market, and all of it. I don't know. And you had spoken, I think you put out a video even this week about this K-shaped economy, which I think speaks to this to some degree, Dr. Yoon. Tell us what the K-shaped economy is and how this might apply.
I think America is, getting into more solidifying the position of haves doing well, have-nots falling behind. So if one looks at the economic data, for example, credit card delinquency rate reaching as high level as if we are currently in a recession. I mean, we are not in a recession because we're still adding job sluggishly, but we're still adding job condition. Auto loan default rate as if we are in a recession. Consumer sentiment index much lower today than in the foreclosure crisis of 2010 period. I mean, when we had 7 million job losses, people losing home, yet people today, we don't have foreclosure crisis, very minimal distressed property sales, yet people are saying the condition today is even worse. So the way to interpret all this is that people who are not owning things, and not owning gold, not owning stocks, clearly not owning home, they're feeling tapped out, financially tapped out, while people who are owning things, especially housing, where home values continue to increase. I did a quick calculation before coming on to this podcast. $130,000 in housing wealth for someone who are owner pre-COVID versus today. So by being an owner, $130,000 in housing wealth buildup. And that provides a lot of flexibility in regards to can they trade up? Well, it certainly provides that. Maybe some people are locked in and they don't want to give up their low interest rate condition. But at some point, they have to move. They have a new job at a different town. Maybe they're reaching the retirement age. Maybe there is a marriages, divorces, additional child, they need a larger size home. So we do know that people need to move. It's just that right now, the condition appears to be improving. I think the inventory is one lacking ingredient. I would like to see much robust increase in inventory condition. But yeah, the K-shape, and we don't want that K-shape to continue. And only way to get more Americans back into the fold of American opportunity is to say that we have more inventory. And maybe that requires, say, in some locality, building not 3 homes in 1 acre, but why not 6? It doesn't have to be every neighborhood, but in a certain neighborhood, maybe, we can be. So by forcing to build 6 homes in an acre, automatically you are building smaller size home and more affordable homes. So that gets into the entry level home process where later they can trade up.
Dr. Yoon, speaking about consumer sentiment as it sits, and wow, what a surprising comparison to the great financial crisis, and that it's worse here. And it seems to me, it's not the first time our listeners have heard me say this, but it seems to be that federal monetary policy over the last 2.5 decades has kind of accidentally or as a side consequent performed this really odd psychological experiment on the American consumer and home buyer. And December sales good, January down. You've got everybody it feels like if rates were just sitting at 6.5 18 months ago and said we're not moving them, people would have done things for all the pent-up demand reasons that you've talked about. But we've given everyone a reason just to sit and wait for some change, that it's got to be better than this because it's so bad. It's just a really wild world that we live in here. And I hope a return to normalcy can come in beginning this year.
You are right about that. I think it was clearly accidental in terms of this K-shaped condition. I don't think anyone, Washington policymakers said, oh, let's help out the wealthy and not help out the poor. I don't think that was the policy measure of the monetary policy, but lower interest rate helps the stock market. Lower interest rate helps the housing wealth condition. But I think, the situation is, yes, there will be some changes in interest rate environment, but we always need to make sure we have adequate supply. So if we have adequate supply of homes, home prices did not have to rise so abruptly and quickly. It could rise more moderately, giving chance for people's income to rise along with it. But you look at, say, Britain or Australia, they're encountering housing crisis in a sense that younger generation unable to participate in wealth gains. So that's the housing crisis of K-shape, not about foreclosures or price decline. And I hope America do not go that direction. One encouraging sign is we know that Democrats and Republicans, they don't talk to each other. They're saying nasty things about each other. But this week, they passed a housing for the 21st century, the bill, by the margin of 390 yes, 10 no. This is a bipartisan agreement that we need to focus on housing. And if you look at the details of that bill, it's all at the margin about how do we boost housing, provide tax credit incentive to develop some of the depressed zone, to bring more housing, remove some of the red tape so the builders can be more active. So convert some of the empty commercial buildings into residential units, all that type of thing to bring more supply. So I'm glad at least there appears to be bipartisan agreement in today's, definitely politically heated environment to say, let's focus on housing, let's get more American on the path towards ownership.
Boy, has to be a no-brainer, policy to, like you said, to get the Democrats and Republicans to agree on anything. And this certainly falls in that bucket of kind of a no-brainer policy. And I think you'd referenced this earlier. I think, with this being a midterm election year, that is going to be a factor. I mean, they're all going to be dealing with affordability issues or wanting to identify, hey, we're doing something to help address the affordability. And so it maybe doesn't surprise me. It's probably in their political interest in some sense to come together and at least try to make some progress. You've touched on the supply side, which I really feel is a lot of the challenge. And or has been, even from the density, 3 housing units per acre versus 6, all of these things, have an impact on the supply and on the pricing, of the available inventory. And so I'm hopeful that we will see some meaningful improvements across the board. I mean, one of the things I observe a lot of times is when the government wants to stimulate a specific activity, they're pretty good at attacking it from the demand side of, giving tax credits or like financial incentives, but that tends to have the net effect of driving the price of the asset up rather than, necessarily making it more affordable, to the people that they're trying to help. Like you said, I think sometimes there are unintended consequences where it's not, this evil scheme to only help the wealthy, but the even well-guided policies don't always have the intended, outcome in the long term that, that they hope for. Obviously, one of those, desired outcomes is for greater affordability as well as for just greater volume of and access to transactions. I wanted to pull up and share for just a minute to maybe get your response to, this won't be new to you because it's in a report that you published on NAR's website. We'll put a link to it and love to try to promote as much of this information that you guys do a wonderful job of putting out and projecting as possible. It's been fun to see, or fun and insightful, I guess, to see the 2025 data, relative to the projections for 2026, from existing home sales going up 14%. Honestly, Dr. Enoch's a little surprised to see that new home sales in 2025 even, took a step backwards by, maybe 2%, if I'm reading that correctly. And I think you're anticipating at least a 5% increase in new home sales. What of this data maybe stands out to you, and have you seen any data that suggests maybe a change to what some of these projections were? I think this report came out in December of last year. I'd love your perspective on it.
Naturally, with the incoming data throughout the year, if I need to modify the forecast, certainly I will be modifying. But as of now, the mortgage rate, if you look in the middle column or the middle row, where last year it averaged 6.7, a little better towards the end of the year, near 7% early part of 2025. This year to average 6%, which means that some weeks it could be even 5.8, other weeks 6.3, bouncing around that level. But how many additional people can qualify to buy a home, assuming home prices really do not accelerate? So 3%, 4% condition. Before going into the top line on the forecast, I also want to comment on the job gains. I don't see an economic recession. The revised figure on the payroll showed last year it was only like 100,000 job gain, not the 400,000 that you see here. So very minimal. But I think we're going to have about 1 million job addition, based on all the capital expenditure some of the technology companies are planning for. There will be greater tax refund this year for most Americans. So there is a little stimulus in the pocket. But it's not going to be 2 million job addition. And one big reason for that is southern border crossing is essentially shut down. So as one is saying, the jobs are going to people who are in the country, not people who are crossing the border to get a job. And that's why the unemployment rate, even with little slower job gain, unemployment rate will continue to remain tight because jobs are going towards Americans. Now, the top line. Existing home sales forecast, 14%. This is, again, doing the statistical model, how many additional people qualify, how many people among those qualifying respond to it. So that's based on our past historical experience of it. New home sales, the December figure, I have to tally it up, so I'm not sure if it's actually down 2% or not. But the new home sales market, home builder market, one can say actually they're back to pre-COVID condition because builders have a unique advantage that the realtors do not. Builders can create inventory. And once they create inventory, they can decide, well, do they do a price reduction to attract buyers or do they do mortgage rate buy down? And they figured out mortgage rate buy down actually improves a better condition. So the builders can play with this type of thing. So they're back up to pre-COVID sales. But the realtors are at only 75% of the pre-COVID activity. So when we see a 14% jump, this is only halfway getting back to pre-COVID. We need another 17% growth in, say, 2027 to get us back to pre-COVID. And let's remember, we have increased population, currently 6 million more people with job today compared to pre-COVID. We should have record high home sales, but we don't, because of some of the affordability challenges, lack of inventory, but at least directionally, things appears to be opening up a little better in 2026. January figures, bummer, but let's see what happens as we go into the spring home buying season.
Well, Dr. Yoon, you are have been very gracious with your time. I've got one more question, but I know we've got to get you to your conference. So this will be the last one. Boy, you have been at NAR since 2000 and the chief economist since September of 2008, which is probably not a coincidence that it's around the great financial crisis. You've seen a lot. One thing is for sure is that the rate of change is increasing on all things and specifically around technology. Its impact on all things, the economy for sure, but housing and real estate generally. I'm curious to any data correlations or thoughts that you may have, maybe that will one day lead to some data correlations or analysis on the impact of artificial intelligence in real estate one way or another. What do you think?
Artificial intelligence is here to stay. It will continue to improve. Maybe it will accelerate in terms of technological improvement. The real estate professionals at all levels need to adapt to it, because people do not adapt to it. You will be left behind by your competitors who are adopting to artificial intelligence. Also, from consumers' angle, just look at potential challenges to real estate. Consumer asks how do I buy a home without using a realtor? And you will spit out all this part. But I think at the end of the day, what we will find is that buying a real estate is such a major expenditure. People want to make sure that there's no fraudulent activity involved. They want to make sure that everything is lining up correctly, home inspection, appraisals, everything, line up properly before doing that major transaction. Typical home prices at $400,000. They don't want to be, scammed out of that process. And the result where consumers have worked with the realtors, consistently showing huge appreciation for their realtor service in that successful transaction. Now, consumers' attitude towards real estate agents or other realtors is not that great, but to their realtor, they love it. They are saying, "Oh, I feel so grateful that my realtor helped out me on this process." So I think that technology will help improve the home buying process, but it's still the case where the number of FSBO, which we have been tracking over time, even with continuous advances in technology, has been trending down. When I first came, 25 years ago, it was around 11, 12% FSBOs. Lately, we're finding about 6% of FSBO, and of those FSBOs is usually family-to-family transaction. It's not a stranger-to-stranger transaction, which is a testament that people want to have a professional representation. So even with artificial intelligence, I think that will continue. And it's just a matter of who can adopt the technology better to better serve their clients.
What a world. What a world. Well, Dr. Yoon, you are certainly a feather in the Market Moves cap, your appearance here. Thank you for making the time and being so gracious with it. We wish you luck at your conference, and we'll hope to have you back sometime as the market certainly changes.
Great. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Mark, for having me, and just great to be joining you.
Very good. Thank you.
Well, that was fun, Jeff. Hitting on this AI topic that we were touching on just as Dr. Yoon was departing, he touched a lot on the impact on the real estate professional. And my goodness, are we spending a lot of time talking about that? And no doubt that is a impact on realtors and real estate agents at large. We've talked a little about Open Door. I think they're trying to disrupt that on some level. Maybe not successfully, but certainly trying. And we see those sorts of things on the appraisal side. We've heard, friend of the pod, John Downs, talk about this from the mortgage broker side. AI is everywhere and it's on our mind. But one thing that really comes to mind from a housing market or real estate perspective is that there are a lot of assets that I'm a little concerned about, cash being one of them, right? Or a number of other things that are out there. But it really does stand to reason for me that real estate is one of those things that in an abundant world is still finite, and the supply is fairly fixed, certainly of land. Maybe AI helps us build homes much faster. In fact, I think it undoubtedly will. But land sure seems like something that will increase in value. And in one of the few things in an abundant world that we think about, or as I think about, and this is no doubt, some fanciful thing that maybe never gets here, but at least a useful thought exercise, that land is one of those things that really can hold value. And I think is if Gen Z is moving away from home ownership. Yeah, I don't know if that's going to be the best long-term play if things change from an abundance perspective. So I don't know, just moonshot sort of thoughts here after having Dr. Yoon on.
Yeah, boy, it really did enjoy the conversation for sure. And I think that is an interesting point, that if you self-select out of owning real property, in the long run, my guess is that you probably look back and end up regretting that. I mean, and land is an interesting thing to consider, Mark, because you're right, it's finite. I mean, unless you're dredging up the sea and creating islands like you've seen done, in rare cases. But I mean, that's that's not solving a housing shortage. That's kind of a luxury vacation, solution or something. You're in a state that has a whole bunch of land that's not currently, developed or used. I mean, you can drive through Texas forever, and have massive swaths of undeveloped land. And, at a sign of the times, we're not at this recovery of 2026 yet. I keep saying yes to taking on appraisals that I probably wouldn't, and usually live to regret. But I drove 40 miles on dirt roads yesterday, and just tons and tons of untouched, undeveloped land. I mean, there's a lot to be tapped, but in terms of stuff but none of that stuff's going to be developed, probably not in my lifetime, but certainly not on the horizon. And that's not solving the housing shortage or affordability issues either. But I really do think there is, some interesting perspectives on like what can be done in an age of abundance with artificial intelligence, where, land that is like on the outskirts of current developments and stuff, definitely has value for expansion. I mean, people want convenience, as part of technology, as part of proximity, where do I live and what does my lifestyle look like? Some people live 40 miles outside of town and in rural settings, but that's not where most are going to try to get to. So I think long term it's interesting. Like there is value in this tangible and fixed quantity asset. It's not evenly distributed, but it's definitely there, and I don't think going anywhere.
You bet, Jeff. Well, boy, if there aren't two peas in a pod more tighter than appraisers and economists, I don't know who they would be. I mean, it was great to have Dr. Yoon here, speaking our language, the market moves language, really on a lot of levels. And Dr. Yoon in NAR is one of 10 or 12 different sources that you and I compile a lot of information from, and it struck me. And I honestly, I think that Dr. Yoon's perspective was a little late into consideration in the market moves world. I didn't know a lot of the stuff existed personally. And having Keisha on and Keisha even joining NAR helped me kind of understand what was, what is available there. But I was struck by how a lot of similar perspectives and outlooks that we share. I think both Dr. Yoon and us will give Kevin Warsh a high five for his stated view on the world. This is a better world that he is describing, at least desiring to get to. Kevin Warsh, the hopeful new Fed chairman, and just a lot of outlook on the market. And I really hope that market moves for our listeners is filling a void that a lot of real estate professionals have, certainly on the appraisal side, but in the sales sides too. You're at a cocktail party. First thing everybody wants to know, as you said, Jeff, how is the market doing? And I mean, I quite honestly, a lot of times my answer would be just kind of looking at, well, I mean, I get an order, I pick 3 sales, I deliver it. I can't really tell you. I mean, I don't think about it that much beyond one assignment, one assignment at a time. And so I don't know, for me, I'm hopeful that this podcast for the regular listener here fills that void. Like, these are things we probably should have at least high level familiarity with. Sure to talk at cocktail parties, but probably more important is to speak intelligently to the consumer, to potential clients, and be that real consultant out in the marketplace.
Yeah, you make a really good point. I find with this labor of love that we've been that we've pursued, that I almost have to now kind of be careful not to like nerd out or give them a 20-minute synopsis of what's going on with interest rates and first-time home buyer trends and all those sorts of things, because we're at least researching, thinking about, and can speak intelligently to those. But you've always got homeowners, you've always got agents, the people that want the appraiser's perspective, and to have that informed by what's happening, at least at some level, at the macro level, to understand, what drives interest rates, what is currently influencing them, and where might that go, moving forward, what impact could that have on values and supply and all of those sorts of things, of course, matter. But I think you make a good point. I mean, in social settings, it's great to be able to speak intelligently. I still aspire to doing that someday. But but more so for in the business perspective, speaking to potential clients, people that might want to work with you or use you as an individual appraiser or your firm or whatever, having a command of what's happening and why it's happening and where things might go just instills a lot of confidence that not every appraiser is comfortable speaking with or speaking to. And so it's forced us to learn and understand a lot. I hope that we're communicating that in a way that's effective to the listeners and that helps them feel more informed, not just what we have to say about it, but the resources that we reference and are pointing to and that sort of thing. So it's a lot of fun to do. I mean, we do it because we love it, not because it's paying bills or anything, but it definitely has a lot of benefits, in just better understanding the world around us, for sure.
You bet. Well, a really big thank you, Jeff. I know I'm speaking for you also. Big thank you to Keisha Wilkinson for the connection here, and a great conversation, Jeff. Look forward to many more.
As always, yeah, a lot of fun for sure. So yes, thank you, Keisha, and until next time, Mark.